Welcome to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, where we help business leaders and individual contributors with actionable insights to hit their number and figure out the nuances of truly operating a business globally today, squeezing the essence of the lessons learned from the planet's top tech leaders. This is your guide to joining the fast track to global market scaling.
Welcome, I'm Ross Lauder, your host from Single Focus Talent, and I'm joined by our non-exec director, John Quigley, today.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
On this episode, we are speaking with René Lönngren at Mural. We're excited to have him on the show because they really exemplify digital collaboration. He's their director of Europe, which is seeing great strides, particularly in this new world we're experiencing post-coronavirus, with a definite bent towards working from home today and what that means in organizations and how to do it really effectively, not just talking about it. So welcome to the show, René.
Thank you, Ross. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's dive right in. I think what I'm always curious about to learn in the beginning is, take us through your career journey. Like, what were the steps you took in the beginning? I know you're obviously originally from Sweden, now living in a much sunnier climate down in Barcelona in Spain. So really walk us through that journey. What were some of the inflection points and decisions you took, and why are you so passionate about what you're doing right now, if you would?
Yeah, absolutely. So I, for a very long time, would probably define myself as someone that would go the entrepreneurial path to create a project or even a company around my passions and things that I cared about. And started out pretty early on in media, discovered the internet early in Sweden around 96 and built an internet agency, and did quite a few projects in the media, digital media space eventually. In the late 90s, I felt that maybe it was time to downshift. That was at least my thinking at the time, and switch lifestyle. I met someone who spoke very well about Barcelona, and I thought, yeah, maybe that's where I should go. I at the time felt that there was something within me that wanted to, I guess, switch a little bit the perception of time, right? So time in Nordic countries is quite different from the perception of time in a more Latin or Southern country. So I went for that, moved to Spain, continued for about another year working for a digital agency in Barcelona. But my passion at the time was to discover the city and be at the right place at the right time. And that led me to eventually start an editorial publishing company, which I ran for about 15 years. We grew to around 20 cities across Europe mainly. And the one thing that I realized during that journey was how, leadership for me was, I guess at the time, very much about being passionate and having a vision and, seeing something that maybe others didn't, and, pursuing that relentlessly. But the downside was that I didn't feel that I did very well as a manager. That led me to think about, ways I could improve and learn from others. So I joined something called the Entrepreneur Organization. And there I learned about efficient meetings, interactions, bonding, being open, building trust in a small group, etc. And that eventually led me into starting a company together with a fellow EO member, or he had started a company I joined early on called Circles, where we built a platform around digital peer groups, right? So finding peers online as opposed to physically. So I ended up sort of into this rabbit hole of how can you build trust and connection remotely without actually being in person. Building software for that. I became very interested in meeting facilitation, trained a lot around that, led some groups. That eventually led me to leave Circles, start my own meeting facilitation or build my own meeting facilitation software. So I'm definitely not an software engineer by any means, but I did explore that, built the software for 1 year, did kind of all the bits around that from design to the development parts, etc. And after 1 year, I was looking to either raise money, start a business again and build that out. And what I ended up doing was I met Mark Tippin, who was a facilitator or is a facilitator and also works with Mural. And he then said, hey, there's some matches around what you built in your software, what we're trying to do at Mural. It seems like it's a great fit, great timing. We're interested in expanding into Europe. And he introduced me to Mariano, who's the CEO of Mural. And he basically said, let's think about this. We're raising money. We want to expand into Europe. Maybe we can do something together. And here we are now. I've been with Mural since August last year, and I'm leading the expansion, especially on the customer sides across all the countries in Europe. So that was my story.
I think what's interesting to me there, and some of the things that struck me, is your kind of media background. And I've worked in digital agencies. I've owned and operated digital agencies in the past, and also worked in software sales. And I think the sales process, the sales methodology is very much similar in respect to the fact that it's quite evangelical, right? It's not something somebody necessarily needs in their life to function, but it's something that they need to want to have, I suppose. You need to create demand and, make people feel excited about potential. Maybe if you would just talk to us about, some of the sales you're involved with and how you kind of teach and lead that methodology, obviously very much at an enterprise collaborative level, and, some of the learnings you've had about how you kind of inspire others and inspire a prospect in the sales process, if you could.
Yeah, so at least when it comes to my personal experience, it's very much been based around relationship building more than anything else. I guess another way of looking at that would be around empathy in terms of understanding customer needs on different levels, and then bridging that in a way with maybe more, say, classical conventional sales methods, whatever that might be. Right, so we have a few that we implement in at Mural, but especially around, we want to make sure that we can help our customers in an efficient way in understanding their needs, etc. But I like to simplify it. At least what I feel that is the absolutely most important thing is to be able to create that connection and that understanding. And of course, all the work that we do now is, it's 100% over video or audio, right? So that also gives you a great opportunity to find those connections quickly, right? Bond with the person that you're talking to, use the good questions and listening and silence and other things to understand really what's going on their end. I don't know if that's helpful for you. If that's what you meant, or if you would like me to dive into any parts of that more.
No. I think that's quite explanatory, and the again, I think it really is quite relevant and prevalent now, considering how widespread digital workplace is. And from your story there, Rene, you have huge experience of kind of building remote working tools and leading virtual teams. So I can absolutely see how you were a good fit for Mural, and how you interacted there. What are some of the things that people need to know, right? Say our listeners are there, and some of them kind of it's brand new territory for them to be working remotely. At the best of times, some folks don't even collaborate too well when they're actually physically in a room together. Not to mention, if they're remote. So kind of how can they do it better? Like, I mean, what advice would you have for those people? And you know, because I do understand that, you know, your Mural are taking people, you know, from offline to online environments, and not just for video, right? I mean, you're kind of replacing a place with space, you know, and a space where people can collaborate and listen to each other and do all kinds of things. So, I mean, tell me how you guys do that, and, you know, what are some of the top things that people need to know to do it properly or to do it well, in your view?
Yeah, absolutely, John. So effectively, Mural, as you mentioned, is helping a lot of customers with replacing what used to be a physical meeting room, right? A place where you go into that room and do work together, right? But so that's one thing, that Mural as a software, which is a digital collaboration space that lets you very quickly, in real time, solve problems together, your brainstormings, etc. You can think of it as a digital whiteboard with superpowers to some degree, right? Facilitation features and templates and so forth. Right? A lot of that.
And is there actually a whiteboard? You know, like on in your platform, on the software, where you can write stuff virtually on a whiteboard as though it was a whiteboard?
Right, so the Mural is essentially a digital whiteboard, right? So you can take notes, sticky notes, drag in images and links and so forth. But when it becomes really interesting, we look at two aspects. So one is all the things you can do with all that content that you put into the platform. So ways you can look for patterns, organize the content, right? You can take a long list of Excel cells, for example, copy them, paste them into Mural, and convert them into sticky notes and organize them. And you can pull in any of our frameworks. We have hundreds of templates and tens of different frameworks, like a business model canvas, for example, or idea prioritization matrix, or risk evaluation, etc. And you can organize these sticky notes in real time together with other people, of course, build upon them, add more, duplicate them, etc. Right? So a lot of that is incredibly efficient compared to, let's say, if you were to set up a physical workshop, right? You'd have people flying in, doing a physical workshop together, where they would have to, do all the prep work, right? Set up the room, apart from everything that includes, just getting people to the location, right? But you set up your room, you have the pen and paper, sticky notes, etc. There's a lot of elements that by going digital, you simplify that process. Right? We can go back to sort of the value of that in a minute. But that is sort of the practical efficiency side of it. So that will lead me sort of into the value of remote work, and some of the things that I've learned about remote work is that we focus very much on the facilitator. Right, on the person that will be leading that workshop, or will be leading that meeting, or is simply the person that has gathered people together to solve a problem. So we have an entire team, a facilitation team on the engineering side, as well as on the actual facilitator team of people that are helping our customers to become better facilitators, or supporting them in their meetings. We have an engineering team that are, in a sense, obsessing around how can we build software that will help these humans, these people, have more interesting and engaging meetings. Right? So it's not only about, let's say, the efficiency gains, it's also about how can we use technology and what we've learned about what makes for a great meeting, and build software that will help for that. Right? So there's things such as you can have everyone on that board, right? Their mouses will navigate across the canvas. You can summon everyone and drive their attention to a specific part in the canvas, right? So you get people really engaged and get everyone to focus on one specific activity. You can time box things. You can really quickly vote, etc. It's a very engaging way of running a meeting, right? Because we're moving away from, meeting where maybe one person is talking, especially if we're thinking in a digital context, right? One person will be talking at the time. When you do a meeting using Mural, you can have 20 or 30 or 40 or even more people creating content and engaging at the same time, right? But what's important, I'll take a step back, right, to answer your question around, remote work, is that the person that is leading that meeting will have certain challenges around how do I keep team or my colleagues engaged? How can I understand what's going on with the people that are in this virtual space? Make sure that I can, beyond just making it really, really efficient, right? How can I make this engaging? How can I bring out the best of people? And a big part that we're also building for within Mural, and something that I'm particularly passionate about, is what makes for a really great virtual meeting beyond the efficiency side of things. So I'll take a break there, and happy to explore that further.
And that's very comprehensive. It sounds like I need a subscription of Mural, and maybe Ross too. That was a very good explanation, and I could actually visualize what you were talking about there, and I can really get why you guys are being used across thousands of universities in the US, for example, and I also know that you're pretty much in the top 20 universities in Europe as well. I could see the use case in those type of environments. So what's your sweet spot, in terms of the types of organizations that you target, in terms of the types of organizations that could really get value? I could see every company could get value from this, but what's really, where are you seeing the most success?
Yeah, so Mural has a bit of a different startup story than many other companies, I think. So the founders of Mural, 3 Argentines that created a gaming company. They ended up selling that company to Disney. One of the founders moved to San Francisco, and they were thinking about, what's next? What are some of the projects that we could be doing? And they realized that it was incredibly hard to build games remotely, right? With 2 people in Buenos Aires and 1 person in San Francisco. So they ended up exploring this idea of a visual space where they could kind of map out what this game could possibly be about, right? So software for just visualizing or getting an overview of different components and elements of what the product could be about. And as they did that, they eventually got introduced to someone at IDEO who offered them, they got essentially incubated at IDEO in San Francisco. And eventually they met Phil Gilbert, who is and was the head of design at IBM. And Phil Gilbert had this vision that IBM had to ideally become more design focused, right? He couldn't afford to hire lots of more designers, but he wanted to give it a go to make IBM as more focused on a customer-centric focus and using design thinking as the method for that. And design thinking is a highly visual process, right? So they had the challenge of how do we actually do this at scale with 380,000 employees? And they ended up taking a big bet, I guess you could say, and using Mural for that, right? So the Mural team, talking about 7-8 years ago, started building out the product to help IBM scale design thinking across several tens of thousands of people, right? And currently there's 100,000 people, more than 100,000 people that have used Mural at IBM, and I think something like 60,000, 70,000 people that are using Mural every single week. So now it goes way beyond design thinking, right? So it's basically a space where we can map out solutions together, right, in real time. And depending on your problem and your challenge, right, you can imagine the use cases are endless. So a lot of agile teams that are struggling with finding ways to replace the physical Scrum boards that they would have on the wall somewhere. We're realizing that my team is spread out in different locations. Just holding up the webcam to them and show them the boards, they can see the part that doesn't work well. Making that
plus you integrate with some of the tools they use, right? Like GitHub and Jira and Slack, those kind of tools.
Yeah, so integrations and ecosystem it's always about how can you make sure that the work that you do in one place can be continued somewhere else, vice versa. Right? So building out an ecosystem is a very important part of what we do as well. as you mentioned, there's integration with Jira and other tools from Atlassian. Atlassian is also one of our customers. So yeah, this a big part of this shift that you mentioned as well, right, John, that we're going from having a physical space where we go into a room and do work together, and now that's being shifted over towards a digital space. Yeah, different teams find different usage of this space, and you're right, we work with a lot of university, but also with around 40% of the largest companies in the world.
Wow, and that's a very interesting story, the kind of genesis of Mural and kind of how it came to be, and I can absolutely see the I can see how that would have evolved, particularly with such a large organization like IBM. Great company to be able to test and iterate using a base like that of 400,000 odd people. I spoke to you before, Rene, and I know that you believe in leadership by partnership, and I'm curious in terms of your current organization that you run now, your current business across Europe. Talk to me a little bit about the key steps in building your team, and kind of take yourself back to this time last year when you joined the company. How many people did you have at that stage, and how many people do you have now? And how did you build your team, and what steps did you use? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. So as a company, I joined in August last year. We were about 80 people, and we're looking at ending this year with around 300 people, right, globally. So this is not only Europe. In terms of the work that we're doing, expanding and bringing on people, and if I stay a little bit with this idea of the partnership, which is something that I find to be particularly interesting. But I spent a lot of time thinking about leadership. You might have read this yourselves or heard the story, but there was an article, I think, in Harvard Business Review from a consultant who helps companies with leadership. Right? And his son came home from school and said, Dad, I've been the class leader today. And he said, oh, that's wonderful, my son. So what have you been doing then today as a leader? Oh, I got to hold the door open for everyone else as they went out. And the author goes on to basically say, wow, that was the best definition of leadership, of modern leadership he'd ever heard. Right? And that really resonated with me, right, up until this moment. Now, this was a few years ago since I read that. So I think a lot about what does that really mean of being able to open the door for other people, right? To make it possible for them to do the job that they need to do, to empower and enable others. And I'm particularly interested in, as we hire, or as I add more people to my team, which is mainly around the go-to-market team, to see, what kind of leaders have they thrived with in the past, right? To explore that as we do interviews, to figure out what kind of leadership, can I provide that kind of leadership to them if they would report to me, and how can we adopt as an organization to make sure that everyone gets what they need, right? Someone that can open the door for them and make this possible. So yeah, that's we're, as an organization, we're very value driven, and one of our key values is to make others successful. I think that resonates a lot with that story as well.
I think for me, that really typifies what I would call servant leadership. So holding the door open is really what you're doing is you're uplifting, you're enabling, you're kind of encouraging, etc. So your job is not to be their boss or their manager. Your job is to enable them with the tools and the psychological mindset to actually be successful themselves. So I fully support that as well. And one of the things that's kind of struck me here as we're talking, Rene, is the fact that with a tool like Mural, it really opens up employment opportunities. And what I mean by that is, like, all of us are physically located here in Ireland in Single Focus Talent, and we had an office which we no longer need, quite honestly, because we all work remotely. But now, and as you probably know, Ireland as a platform has built its kind of operations and its tax base, its low corporation tax, on the premise that all the employees will come here from all over Europe. And that's may no longer be the case. I mean, it may be the case that people will forever work from home, etc. And I'm curious to see how governments react to that, quite frankly, because I think we've had a catalyst now with COVID-19 and an unintended consequence of enabling folks to be more autonomous and work from home with digital platforms, certainly in the tech space. And I'm curious to know, like, what kind of conversations are you having with prospects and customers where, you're saying, well, actually with our platform, you're entirely location independent and it opens up a bigger talent pool. Like, how does that narrative look for you guys at Mural?
So definitely internally, it's something that is very natural for us to be able to work remotely. And of course, our product helps our customers to do the same thing as well. I can give you an example of that. When it comes to talent acquisition, I think that's been very clear for a lot of tech companies based in San Francisco specifically, that a lot of people started questioning why would they live in a specific place, which is so expensive and has a lot of tax around sort of commuting and so forth, right? Where they could actually do the same job from somewhere else, far less expensive with higher life quality, right? It could be true for many places in the world. And so our take on that is we're clearly just looking for the best fit, right? The right person for the job, and independent of where they are at, and solving for that by having other processes in place, and many of them around efficiency and making sure that we can do the best work together and that we can support our customers and build our product and so forth. Another part, which it kind of brings us back a little bit to challenges around remote work, is around how we can get people to feel connected and as a part of something. Right? One of the biggest pain points with remote work is that people feel isolated, feel disconnected. So as a company, we're solving for that by spending a lot of time on warm-up exercises and activities in our all-hands meetings that are bringing things more to a personal level, and laughter, and trying to make it fun, engaging, and sharing stories and so forth, and having very, very active Slack channels that are also about music or life or things that are going on. So there's a few things, but taking that serious, we have a person on our team, Lila, who is very much dedicated to making sure that we live those values and that we build a culture of collaboration and engagement. And I'll just bring to that something more related to how Mural as a software helps companies solve for this. So we work with EY, their wave spaces, digital innovation spaces. Since a few years are essentially powered by Mural. They have these beautiful spaces, invested a lot of money in technology, and they have these huge touch screens where they bring in customers and they sort of wow them about their studies around the future, etc. And they kind of migrated from PowerPoints that were very linear to this immersive storytelling. This was very much a partnership project between Jim Callback, our head of customer experience, based in New Jersey, and EY in New York. And this has since been rolled out to, if not all, but many of the EY wave spaces across the world. Now, what was interesting, I thought, that they would give this experience to the customers in those physical places, right? And then everyone went home one day in March, right? And EY could, because of having everything in the cloud, continue that immersive storytelling experience seamlessly. Right? It already existed in the cloud; it was already enabled. Right? So many other consultancies struggled a lot, saying, "Okay, we have to deliver value to our customers, and we do that through workshops. We can't travel anymore." Right? Also,
So I suppose that's That's making me curious then in relation to some of the industries that kind of lean themselves into this. So, the obvious one is are some of the ones we've spoken about, like you spoke about gaming as the inception of the company. We spoke about technology, but EY wouldn't strike me as one that would be potentially remote. And I know we're speaking to a lot of customers and clients at the moment where they're actually like yourselves, where you're enabling others to go through that digitization, because as I say, COVID and Corona has been a catalyst to that. But maybe could you share with us some industries that kind of have surprised you, that came to you and said, hey, I think this is a fit for us, that wouldn't have traditionally been in that realm?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I haven't necessarily been personally that surprised, because we just realized that you probably seen this meme going around where, what drove digital transformation in your company? A, the CTO, B, the CIO, C, COVID-19, right? And that is literally what we lived, or continue to experience, I should say, with so many different customers, right? There's just a huge drive towards, we as a company, as an organization, need to very quickly become more agile in the way that we collaborate in a virtual setting, because we may or may not be able to go to an office, but for sure there will be customers and partners that will not wish to travel for a very long time, right? So we need to look at this in a much more, from a much more digital perspective, right? So there are a large amount of companies, the majority it seems like, but surely thousands, that are looking at, how do we go digital, this way of working, this way of interacting. So yeah, I haven't really been surprised. It's just been, overwhelming over the last 3 or 4 months to see the interest that we've had. We've tried to really help as many customers as possible to do this transition. And this is a big part of what we do at Mural as well, where yes, we build software, but we're also incredibly focused on partnership with our customers in terms of helping them going through this shift. So it's not only about a piece of software, but it's also about how can we help you take some of the existing processes and the challenges that you have, and help you transform the way you work, make it about a more agile way of working. We do workshops and webinars around that as well, apart from sort of the basics of how do you run PI planning for agile teams online. Yes, that's one thing, but it's also about how can you make the best out of this shift that's happening and that you're to some degree forced to do. Yeah.
So Rene, high level leaders like yourself look at all kinds of kind of key metrics, to kind of get a health check on their business and stuff like that. What are the key metrics you look at on a daily or weekly basis to inform you that you're on the right track?
From my experience, most SaaS businesses, right, cloud-based software as a service businesses, we look at many of the similar metrics, which is essentially how much new revenue are we signing up, how many signups do we have, what's our churn rate, how do we convert new leads into become customers, right, and having all the different teams to support that. But yeah, monthly recurring revenue or annual recurring revenue, those are metrics that are important for any SaaS business.
Cool. And what are some of the challenges you're facing in growing the business right now? I'll give you an example. Some people might say, well, the quality inbound leads isn't great, or some people might say, well, there's a bit of role corruption. I'd rather my inside sales guys just focus on selling rather than qualifying up deals or whatever, or there's a myriad of things. But like, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're facing in your business in terms of growing it?
Yeah, so we have, more than anything, I would say, very fortunate challenges, incredibly fortunate ones. And one could be, what do we do with all these leads that we have? Because it just exploded, right? So we've been going on for quite a few years and had a steady growth, and then all of a sudden, literally everyone went home, right? And you would talk to businesses where that was a total crash for the business, and we have been so fortunate to be on the other side of that, saying for us it was the opposite. Like the phone just started ringing off the hook and incoming leads and emails. And
so you're swimming in leads over there by the sounds of things. Yeah, I heard that your business is up 15x or something like that, which is absolutely remarkable. I mean, it's similar type numbers as kind of, you know, Zoom or DocuSign or any of these guys. DocuSign actually, we've a very close relationship with, but yeah, that's incredible. So probably one of your biggest challenges is getting people to be able to speak to all of these people that are interested in your stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say that the apart from having these privileged challenges, we have real challenges that comes with that, right? To your point, John, that how do we staff up quickly enough to deal with this increase in demand? So we're hiring like crazy, of course. We're trying to, I should say, we need to add a lot of people. We want to definitely hire for a cultural fit and, you know, all those other important elements, right? Finding the right people. So yeah, hiring, building out the business is definitely an ongoing challenge for all of us, all our different teams, right? We're doing what we can to build out internal referral programs and, you know, working with recruiters and so forth. So yeah, you're right. It's a big one.
Very good. So you personally, just a few things, like what's the productivity tool that you couldn't live without? You're probably using a lot of them, and the answer can't be Mural. So what other productivity tool are you using that you can't live without?
Yeah, so I've added this one recently to my toolkit. It's not actually a tool that I would expect to be using, but this is something that is saving me a ton of hours every single month. It's quite specific to our particular situation, I think, which is a tool called Text Expander. And it's just, you know, a bunch of shortcuts to answer certain questions in a specific way. And that is because I deal a lot with customers, right? A lot. And to be able to quickly respond to requests and communicate more efficiently, that has helped me a lot. It's a bit specific to our current situation, right? It's kind of back to this, that a lot of demand, right? How do you deal with that in an efficient way? I also use Todoist personally to plan my tasks and structure my day, and that's a tool that I enjoy a lot. And the founder of Todoist, Amir, used to share office with me here in Barcelona, actually. And his company Doist is also a pioneer within remote work. So learn a lot from him about, you know, they manage their company completely remote since day one. But anyway, Todoist is a great tool for that. So yeah, those would be two tools that are, you know, in front of me multiple times per day.
Very good. I'm going to check them out actually myself. Who are some of your personal heroes? Even one will do, you know. Who do you look up to? Who's been one of your personal heroes, and why do you hold them in such high regard?
Yeah, so I'd go with a slightly maybe broader answer to that, because I found that heroes change over time. Different heroes are important during different periods of your life. So it was a very different thing to be a young budding entrepreneur in my 30s, you know, all about sort of growth and expansion and being, you know, on stage as a kind of trying to be in the center, right? And so I could be, you know, your typical kind of Steve Jobs kind of hero, I guess, at the time. And then becoming a father, right? I had 3 boys. And then you start thinking about, you know, what is it like to be Steve Jobs' son? You know, do they ever get to see their father, right? Or whoever the person might be, or Richard Branson, right, would be another classical one for entrepreneurs. So I think there's been an evolution in when it comes to heroes, going through periods of more reflecting inwards and, thinking more about, like the typical kind of Eckhart Tolle writings of, liberating yourself from your thoughts, right? Finding calmness when things are crazy. And so yeah, I'm not kind of naming any specific cures, I guess, but I think that what I want to share is that my approach at least has always been to, go out and find a book as a starting point. And the best example probably is that I had a period when I was struggling with, I felt very negative, basically, for, way more negative than I would identify with, I guess. And my wife said, "Hey, I think you've been depressed for quite some time." And I said, "Maybe." It didn't resonate with me. I feel, positive person. And I Googled books to read when you're depressed, and found one which is called Feeling Good. I should remember the author now. Anyway, I read that. I picked up that book, and the first thing it said, "You probably picked up this book because you're thinking you might be depressed. And if you're depressed, how depressed are you?" And effectively, it's a test in the book. Okay, you forgot I was depressed, and then it goes straight into sort of a way of solving for that. And I read the book, started reading it on a Sunday, and by Wednesday, I was already doing much better. So anyway, that becomes sort of my go-to answer for heroes. Who wrote the book? What can I learn from them? Yeah.
That's incredible, and thanks for the transparency. And I know that I'm a kind of wear my heart on the sleeve kind of guy, and I always tell people probably overshare, but I suppose that's always helped me personally be kind of a better leader and allow my kind of team to gravitate towards that level of honesty and transparency. It's just the way I like to kind of live my life, as it were. But maybe could you share with us, particularly in the context, just as we wrap up here, what that looks like for you remotely, culture-wise? So you mentioned about doing some exercises when you have your team meetings, etc. But how do you define the culture and set the tone when it's a remote operation for you guys?
Yeah, so by giving a space for people to, being themselves, giving, or I would say more than giving, it's about if you act the way you are, right? You share your point of view, to some degree, your emotions and what you're going through, etc. In a way that sets the tone, right? Helps others. I think another part around that is the way you do it, right? With humor. This can be quite different depending on different cultures, etc. But I find that part of just being present with openness and a bit of humor sets a really good tone for others to do the same. I don't know if it's much more complicated than that when it comes to leadership, and it does help in a virtual context, right? One thing, which this is so obvious to me, but it might not be for many of your listeners, is to turn your video on. Make that into something that you do in all your meetings, right? Bond with people a little bit. I had a call today with a customer, and an entire wall behind him was filled with guitars, right? It was he was a nice guy altogether anyway, but just me being able to connect around that passion of his made a huge difference for the quality of that call on a human level. I don't know if he's going to end up buying more or not, right? But like that kind of self-disclosure. So other customers that are no video on becomes directly much more formal, a lot less high quality human connection. So anyway, but yeah, those are some of the learnings. I think our leadership at Mural, they do a really good job by making it a bit more fun, not so serious, without taking any, without removing, let's say, when there's a serious message, it still needs to be delivered in a serious fashion, right? But you can sort of offer a bit of humor and self-distance, or not taking yourself so seriously. Yes, it's a part of it.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I fully support that. We have clients of ours where they do a final stage of interview remote, And if the camera isn't on, it's fairly much a deal breaker. And I can see why, because you get those inflections, those personal human nuances that each's individual personality would have. So I think the ability, as you rightly said, then to bond over that or build rapport, I think is key to potentially securing a more structured foundational relationship going forward. So I've certainly seen that play out myself personally. Well, look, I really want to thank you for joining us on today's show. I mean, there's a load of key takeaways, I think, from myself that I can very much resonate with. So it's been a real pleasure to speak with you, and we look forward to speaking with you again in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Thanks, John. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Rene. Yeah, wonderful.
You've been listening to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, designed for both established and aspiring career-focused tech rock stars, as well as helping leadership figure out how to speak global in today's multicultural world. For further details, check out sf-talent.com.